Hello.
Good evening.
Happy election day. Ooh. Let's just say happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. I mean, hey, I'm here. I'm alive. I don't
Yeah,
I don't necessarily sound gorgeous, but I showered.
that, yes, that is a good thing.
It is a good thing, and it's a miracle that I survived it because it made me almost pass out. So,
Okay, we're gonna call that a win. You're upright, you're conscious. We can talk about this book and then you can probably go lie down again.
yeah, conscious is a real good thing.
Yeah, it
Although,
is.
for anyone that might be the least bit interested, because if anyone remembers, I did mention the fact that Stephanie so lovingly taught me how to EPP when we were in Pennsylvania, and I have been a little EPP queen while I've been sick. So that's been fun.
Yeah, that's been a positive side of your illness is that you've got some productive hand sewing done.
Yeah. Hi, Dee Marie. It's been a long, yes, Dee Marie, it's been a long year, but a short year too.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Like my soul feels like it was long, but the parts that I enjoyed felt really, really short.
Yeah. And I'm going, huh, what were those again?
And
It's been a,
Janet is using us to watch this fun thing instead of
yes,
an election results. And Janet,
yep.
I understand completely.
And that's what I said. We are so glad for, you guys, Dee Marie, Janet, and our lurkers. We're glad we can be here if you are trying to escape the election news. I certainly am. My husband, I told him we're going live. You're going to put that on your headphones. I don't want
Hmm
to hear it. So
And Dee Marie
I
said,
did do my civic duty,
oh,
though.
you know what? I had my sticker on, but then I took it off just so that you could really see mine. And I was like, this doesn't need to be in the video a year from now. But I did do my vote. DeMarie says I sound really well. You're a really good liar, DeMarie, because
She sounds she sounds better than she did the other day.
on a stream or just on the phone. I don't remember. Did I sound better on the phone?
I think it was on the phone because
Yeah, because I was gonna say I sounded
it's
really
been a
bad.
week. Yeah, it's been a week since we've done a stream. So
Just let's just hope I don't start coughing. Then it won't
yeah, well,
be pretty at all.
well, I guess you've got a few updates to share
I
briefly, and then we can
do.
jump in. We've got many things to show.
Um, so starting our evening here for next week's scheduled reading, we're gonna do pages 137 through 175 for November 12th. Already going to be the 12th. I'm not okay with that. And
Yeah,
then
where to go.
Steph and I have ironed out our schedule here in terms of what's solid. I can't say that like I won't get a wild hair and be like, let's do a pop-up, but like this is the solid stuff. So we're gonna inception for just a sec. And boom. Okay, here it is. I'm gonna go out into the world.
Can you zoom it in some? Because it's
Uh,
small on my screen. Yeah.
well, you know what? Fix your screen then. So here we are. We are on the 5th. We did decide we will do a Needle Miracle Nights on the 13th. And Stephanie, the topic will be
The topic's going to be sort of the other string crafts. So instead of sewing, we're going to take a little bit of time with knitting needles, crochet hooks, and tatting shuttles.
I was even maybe gonna throw in like some lace hooks there, like hooking
Sure.
type things.
Yeah.
Because I have a bunch and I have some that you could probably might be able to argue one way or the other.
Yeah. So all of those hooky sort of things.
So that's what we're gonna do then. The 14th, we're doing a dual stream watch party of the latest episode of the Material Culture series put out by AQSG. Our friend Mia Clift has done an episode, and she is going to be here with us while we do the live watch party, and she's going to answer questions, and she's got behind the scenes stories, and that's going to be like really super fun. And then on the 21st, Stephanie, if you look up here, she has a very special guest on her Cake TV.
Yeah.
Somebody you want to go see.
Yes. Ms. Mary Fons has been tacked down for a date.
Do you guys have any plans of what you'll talk about yet?
Not yet. Not sure yet, but yeah, she's committed. It works into her schedule, so her school schedule's kind of crazy. So I was excited, to get a time with her. So we'll figure it out. It'll be some fun. Mary always brings something crazy to the party, so
Well, I'd say if anybody has any like super like tea questions that they want an update on with Mary, make sure that you're there to ask in chat.
yeah.
And then we'll finish this book the 19th. Yes, will be our last discussion of this book. And then the 26th and the 30th will be other topic nights. We just haven't necessarily decided which topics will be which nights. We've got exhibits to look at and unboxing things. We still haven't looked at the unframing of that patchwork pillowcase that we did at seminar, but we have video and things like that to show, so hang tight. Those will be fun nights regardless. You'll want to be here, I promise.
Yeah.
We've got such a backlog of stuff that we need to go through.
Yeah.
Anything else on this calendar for you, my dear?
I don't think so, other than stop the time from screaming by,
Mm.
so I could enjoy it.
Mm. Okie dokie. So book.
So book, yeah. So before we jump deep into these chapters that we read this week, I have to note, and I did say this yesterday on my stream, so I apologize if you're hearing this for the second time, but I have to say I was a bit vindicated. As we were looking at some of the earlier chapters, they were Marsha MacDowell touched on Seminole patchwork out of the tribes of Florida. And I made the big bold statement that I am positive Seminole patchwork, they were the pioneers of strip piecing, and that those of us who make modern quilts with rotary cutters can thank the Seminoles. And, you know, I'm 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 not just coming like out of my butt with this. Like my mom in the 70s and 80s, like I even as a child, I noticed this trend of, because she did some Seminole patchwork. And I was vindicated. This past weekend, I was at the Sewn in America Symposium at the Daughters of the American Revolution Museum, and one of the lecturers talked about the the time period or the process of the Seminole tribes getting sewing machines and how that changed their patchwork and their craft. And she confirmed the Seminoles started strip piecing as we know it in the 40s.
Hmm.
So 100%, all of the crafters and quilters that took rotary cutters and came up with these, zippy quick, do the strip piecing. I think Eleanor Burns might have been somebody who did some kind of strip piecing stuff. Um, Definitely Seminoles did it first. That's where they took that skill from. So I was
Hmm.
like, yes.
It's always
I
nice to
put
feel
two and two
vindicated.
together. I got four and it made me feel good. Yeah.
And someone else got the same answer.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody who's working on a PhD confirmed. So it's got to be correct.
You know, since you mentioned um that symposium, we
Mhm.
had mentioned on our last stream, and now I'm not gonna be able to find it, about some upcoming events.
Yes, I
And
left those. I did leave those, not the DAR one, but I did leave the other two links in our description.
okay, because yeah, there's one in December, that's Arizona Quilt Study Group.
Uh-huh.
And then in January, there's tea and textiles with the Schwenkfelder.
Hmm.
And those are both virtual events if you need to fill your cup with virtual events. And we've attended both things. They're very good. They're very well done and things like that. Totally worth the money. And actually neither of them are very expensive. One's like 35, I think, and one's like 50 if you do everything. But that symposium was great, right? You had a good
Yeah.
time?
Oh yeah. It was like my brain was broken a little bit.
You would attend again?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I was surprised there was quite a number of people from out of town that traveled from fairly far. A couple of AQSG members who were
How many
from,
people do you think?
you know, Total no idea because there was a big online component to it.
Hmm.
So there could have been hundreds of people online. I don't know.
Hmm.
But people there attending in person, it was probably about 45 or 50.
Hmm.
It was a nice small number. So, there was lots of people to network with and to talk to, and many, many, many of them were academics. So museum people, professors, people, working on their PhDs and their master's programs.
Hmm.
Um, but it was just like it wasn't so crowded that like you were feeling like a sardine in there. It was, it was really nice.
Hmm.
And lots of young people. I was really pleased, and I know everybody looks at me and goes, "Oh, you're young." No, I'm not. People in their 20s and 30s who are getting PhDs are super smart young people, and they were there, and I was excited to see that. Although they're more focused really on fashion and costume, I think is and I mean, I kind of remember that too. Like when I was in art school, like fashion and costume were really big focus for people. Whereas textiles were, you know, a little bit older and dustier than the excitement of fashion and fashion history. So,
Oh,
but
no.
those fashion and costume people tend to come around eventually to textiles and quilts.
I
So
was gonna say like
I
the,
feel,
the dark side.
yeah, I feel like it's a win.
Well, I'm glad that was a good time, even though your brain is mush.
Yeah, I took lots of notes though, so I have notes to refer back to, and did some networking. Got a really good tip on a research tool, and I meant to mention this to you the other day, and I didn't get to finish my conversation with
You
you, but
were hiding things from me?
no, I wasn't. I just haven't. You and I have not had like a really long conversation since
You
then.
guys heard it here
Uh,
first. She was
I've been
hiding things
hiding things
from
from
me.
Jill. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
So what's this research
Um,
tool?
it's called Tropy, Tropy. It's I have not, other than just kind of looking at the information, I have not even created like an account yet, but it's open source. So it's, you get some download links and it looks really cool. Like all of the stuff that I've scanned with Dr. Dunton's collection, I can put all of that in there. No longer is it going to be pictures that are like, 005964 underscore 7236 dot, JPEG. I can actually like they'll they'll start going into a collection and be named. And then anything that needs to be transcribed, there's like a window that goes with the thing that you put your transcription in. Um, if you've got like, if you've got a picture of something and you want to put your attributions and all that information in there, you get metadata, like all kinds of stuff. Very
So it's a
cool.
way to like catalog and organize your
Hmm.
research?
Yeah. So in my case, I've got a lot of pictures
Mm-hmm.
because I literally have just scanned through his ephemera, taking pictures and taking pictures and taking pictures. But there's also other things you'll get, like you might get a transcription. It's a Word document, or any number of things, and to organize that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
have birth certificates, death certificates, the genealogy pieces of it. There's a lot of stuff there, and like I have currently things in folders and I have some spreadsheets, but to be able to marry all that stuff together and make it searchable with keywords and stuff, I mean that's big. Right
Mm-hmm.
now I can search a folder and be like, "Oh, I think I named this thing, Dr. Dunton's magazine articles or something like that." But within a database where you've got things keyword searchable, I could look at it from magazine articles and find all the magazine articles, or I could find, everything he wrote about crazy quilts. And that would include magazine article, transcripts from his or pieces of his unpublished manuscripts, like all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty neat. So,
Mm.
and it's open source. Did I mention open source?
You
That means
did.
free.
Yep, get on it
All
while you
right.
can.
Yeah. So, all right, let's jump in because we're way into the hour here. Um, so the first chapter is about the Waccamaw-Siouan tribe. And I wasn't familiar with the name of the tribe. However, I looked up where they are,
Mhm.
and they're about 3 hours south of where my dad lives in North Carolina. I had like just reading this, I maybe kind of assumed that they were Western North Carolina. They're not, they're an Eastern band. Um, but I think that what, I mean, really comes out of this chapter, and I don't know if you had, different thoughts and feelings, is I mean, I think the gist of this chapter is this tribe's like struggles with identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I read how, they don't have federal recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, there's a lot of like just kind of smaller bands on the East Coast that I've heard about this. They don't like there's several in Maryland that don't have federal recognition. And it's just because they're small and they went unidentified, they were never on a reservation, so on.
It's the same
Um,
scenario with the group that I worked with in Connecticut, to the
mhm.
extent where they have had federal recognition before and then had it taken away
Oh,
because
wow.
of I don't know like details of the story. I remember my professor telling us that it some of it had to do with some muddiness in their like history and keeping the some years weren't intact or something like that. They do, however, they do have a reservation, but not federal recognition.
Yeah, and that's I feel like I mean, obviously neither you nor I know the details here. We're not close enough to these folks, but I'm kind of like sounds like, you're maybe having this gap in the history of your community. It's probably not your fault. So
Yeah,
we're gonna
right.
like double punish you. So like the government came in and like really messed things up for you.
Hmm.
And then we're not gonna give you a federal identity because, well, we came in and messed things up for you. I mean, it's like a double suck. Um, but really what I read in here was kind of like, like it seemed to me that, their quilting is important to them. It seems like there must be a number of quilters in this community, but it's like it's not an Indian thing. I mean, they literally said that in this first little clip. It's, it's
Hmm.
not an Indian thing.
Hmm.
So I feel like their identity is we are Native American. A lot of us quilt, but we're not calling this quilting an Indian thing. It just happens to be a bunch of Indians who quilt. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, that's kind of the way I
Hmm.
read this. And um geographically, so I don't know this area very well. It's if you know anything about the North Carolina as a state, it's kind of like imagine a piece of pizza and then you kind of go with one end
Hmm.
of it. So like the crust end of it is the coast. And so it kind of goes down like this. And then Wilmington is kind of this little bump then it comes down under towards South Carolina. So if you go there to Wilmington and then just go straight west, it's about 45 minutes in. That would be considered coastal. Um, it's just sort of this tract of land of Eastern Carolina that's, it's still considered coastal even there. They're a number of miles inland. Um, this was a tobacco raising area. Some cotton, but like tobacco is really big. And I mean, I just see like what I've read of what little bit is here. I mean, I almost feel bad for, I mean, the person who wrote this, like I'm not disparaging her at all, but I just kind of feel like you really did these folks kind of some disservice. You showed like a couple of like I was it two quilts they even showed, three quilts in this section. And I feel like that like maybe there could have been something better than, they make some crafts, but they don't consider it an Indian thing. Like that made me sad, I guess.
Hmm.
And it's not, I feel like there's some more history about these folks than what was included here that might have been interesting.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, but I have to say, I was pleased to see the bicentennial quilt. Yay, bicentennial quilt. Um, and I had never heard the term pan-Indianism.
Hmm.
So that was a new concept to me. And I mean, I guess it really again it kind of the whole chapter sort of made me a bit sad
Hmm.
because they're really talking about struggling for identity. But on page 109, what I really loved is where they're talking about seizing control of the images and having them mean what they want them to mean. And that's like I think they said in here like repatriating images.
Hmm.
Um and
And you see that a
I
lot in oppressed societies, right?
and I like that idea of like coming back.
Hmm.
Because I mean again like I can use some serious education about how this happens, but in terms of federal recognition and what you've mentioned with the people that you'd worked with, if there is some kind of gap in your identity, and they're able to say, this is what we want to identify ourselves by, and this is how we want our legacy to be seen, and this is what the images that we want to associate with ourselves. But that's a very powerful thing.
Mhm.
It's it's reclamation, but it's also like we're putting, we're going to put the line in the sand, and this is who we are, and we get to say that. You don't decide, we decide. We decide what that is. So I liked the message. I wish there had been maybe a little bit more about, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of just quibbling with how the article or this piece was written. So,
Well, let me point out something that I just found, just a little snip that I just found very interesting, is if you remember earlier on in the reading, I did not go back and check exactly where it was, but we saw mention of collecting those tobacco sacks for
mhm.
quilting and needing some, 300 to make a quilt. In here on 108 is a reference for using those tobacco sacks as the actual batting,
Yeah, I thought
which,
that was interesting.
yeah, I thought that was very interesting because I can, if it's the kind of sack that I'm thinking of, they're pretty thin, right? So
Hmm.
that would be the equivalent more of like a summer weight quilt.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, again, like this is it's 3 hours south of where my dad lives.
Mm-hmm.
It does get cold there. I mean, they have winters. It's a very, 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 very rare that it snows. And so I think even 3 hours south of where he is, it's probably even less likely to snow there. So I think it would be, I think, fairly normal to say that summer weight quilts are sort of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly when I was growing up, the threadbare quilts were perfectly warm. You didn't need like a huge stack of them. This wasn't like the western part of the state where it would be much colder.
When they said,
So,
it says the batting consists of everything from polyester, which in my opinion, polyester is really hot.
yeah. Yeah.
Polyester to cotton, rags, tobacco sacks, and blankets.
Yeah. And I mean that's really that subsistence quilting. Like, you're just getting by with like these are used quilts. They're
Mm-hmm.
not really meant to be beautiful. They're not meant to they're not wedding quilts. They're not for pretty. They're for the fact you need a blanket on the bed, you
Well,
know.
and weren't you telling a story once? This is not really a story in my family history because my mother was the first one to quilt that I know of. I don't know if anyone further back. I know my grandmother did not quilt or her sister. So, but I remember you telling a story, I believe, at one point where when you were sleeping at someone's house, grandma's maybe, she made piles of quilts on the floor for you to sleep on.
Mhm. The
That's, yeah.
pallets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pallets. So if it's a pallet, do they leave the whole quilt out like unfolded, or do they fold it in half and then put the halves on top?
Oh, no, you fold them like you know how our friends at Quilt Studies often fold quilts that
In thirds?
yes.
Uh-huh.
You
And
make
then
you make the you fold the quilt so it's wider than a child and the length so it's the length of a child,
uh-huh.
and then you stack them up and that's what you lay on.
That
It's not,
actually
yeah,
doesn't sound too
it's fold up.
uncomfortable.
It's a princess and the pea situation. If you don't
Well,
have
it sounds
enough.
a lot better than sleeping on a hard floor.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And I remember actually my mom and I talked about this the other day. She's like, "You never had to sleep on the floor on a pallet, did you?" I was like, "Yes, I did." And I was like, "Don't you remember this time and this time?" And it was usually like it was things like weddings and funerals when everybody would be there. Because typically my grandparents when they moved back to North Carolina. They had lived in Virginia for a while. They moved back to North Carolina and they had a number of beds. Like there was enough room for people to sleep, on a normal visiting. But if everybody was there,
Mm-hmm.
the youngest, you start with the
Mm-hmm.
youngest and you go up the line to however many piles of quilts somebody's gonna have to lay on.
It also sounds like a great way to like warm you from all angles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely like, I mean, I can't imagine if you were someplace where it was really, really, really cold, and the floor is cold, like a wood floor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, you would have to have stuff over you too. But yeah, it's certainly. I wouldn't want to sleep on the cold, hard ground. So yeah, a pile of quilts is always going to be preferable.
You know, I'm just like sitting here just thinking about all these piles of quilts in
You
here. I'm
could
like,
just fall back into the your
maybe, well,
your
I'm just like,
inventory.
I'm like, maybe for like some experimental archaeology, like, you know, I'll sleep on a pallet for the night.
Maybe get well first.
I'll do like a live vlog, you know, of like those ghost hunting series where they turn on the camera at 2 in the morning and it's all dark. You know, like hour 365. I can no longer feel my legs because my hip is I'm getting a pressure point on my hip from touching the ground.
Yeah, yeah, pretty
Hey,
much.
Jill's extra funny on cough medicine.
And there you go. Well, did you have anything else to say about the Waccamaw-Siouan?
I did not. I will say because these chapters are so much shorter than that like very first chapter that
Mhm.
was 800 pages long. Um I find that some of the topic like doesn't get meaty enough for me to really have like a you know like reaction. So,
Yeah, and that is maybe that's kind of why I was a little disappointed in that chapter because it just seemed like a not particularly, I mean, I don't want to say it was dry, but it was kind of just a dry reporting of who they are and a little bit of their history and not so much about, because quilting is not a big deal to them.
mhm,
It's just a thing they do. So,
mhm. But I guess on the one hand, it's a little bit of that attitude that we were seeing, in that article that you showed the first night we discussed this book, where like not every, you know, it's not this romanticized idea of like, look, this is the native quilting tradition. Okay, it's become somewhat of this nice quilting tradition, but please let's remember that these are people that missionaries thrust
had
this
other
upon them.
traditions.
Yeah, like thrust this upon them. It's an
Yeah.
attempt to erase identity, and not every tribe has made this their own or made any kind of real connection to this. And I guess that would be a little bit of what the Waccamaw-Siouan tribe
Hmm.
is kind of portraying a bit.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Lakota. And so, um, so I'm looking to see here, the star quilts, and I know we're going to talk about the star quilts again in the basketball chapter, but um, I really liked the information about the miniature star quilts for babies
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what the tradition, I guess not the rules, but the tradition is that it's the sister of the father who gives the quilt or makes the quilt or gives it. And the interesting thing is that the item is called Elisa, meaning to urinate upon.
Okay, I was wondering if like could that be a typo or
I don't know, but I'm wondering, I mean, if this is true. I'm thinking, I mean, it's the kind of thing like you're a baby. Like you're being given this thing. It's like your
to spit
thing.
up on.
Yeah, to like it's
That's kind
okay.
of yeah, that's kind of how
Yeah.
I like arrived at that
It's
too,
like
but I was
it's your blankie,
yeah.
We'll wash it. It's okay. You're a baby. I mean, I get that's what I got for that, but I was like, what?
Yeah, I at
Um,
the end too, I was like, it has to mean that because otherwise I'm like, are we giving quilts to people and then peeing on them? Like I don't, like
no, I mean, I took it as like, that it's the thing that you're gonna like use it to death. I mean,
it's okay to baby on this quilt.
yeah, be a baby on this quilt. You're gonna use it to death. So, and
Mhm.
it further cemented that to me, like down the column where it says, some youths take their star quilts with them when they venture out into the community to search for work, recreation, or to attend college. This
Mhm.
may represent an emotional tie to kin and community. I mean, I love that. And I mean, if this is all accurate representations, I mean, I just picture, these Native American kids with their, these Lakota kids with their quilts and like they keep them, and they just become a thing that like, you might wear your parents' ring or a piece of, some other piece of jewelry or, I don't know, something special that is just with you all the time. And, that's what it sounds like these quilts that they get, as children.
Mhm. Mhm. Right on
And then I
that.
know,
Go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
I
Well, I
was
was
going to
just
go
going
on to
to move
something
on to the
else.
next. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, on this very first page here, um, there's this quote about the Lakota Sioux women of the Northern Plains reservations began making patchwork quilts as utilitarian replacements for buffalo robes and other skin bed coverings.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, it's not great reasons why they had to make quilts to replace skin bed coverings because we basically stole their source of food and life and, all things
Hunted
like
that,
that.
yes. Hunted the buffaloes into extinction. Yes.
Yeah. But this is the first group that we've had mention of where they're replacing something like that. And
Yeah.
I found that interesting because talk about something different to get used to. Because obviously, skin type textiles
Hmm.
feel very, very different than quilted textiles, especially to when you consider the fact that we don't know because there isn't like really mention if they're using always cotton, if they're using um kind of like rougher material, like a muslin or
Hmm.
something like that. So I was like, wow, that's
Yeah, and the weight too. Even imagine a quilt, a very heavy quilt made of wool and
mm-hmm,
corduroy is, I mean, it's going to be heavy, but it's not
mm-hmm,
the weight that like from what I've seen of like buffalo hides. I mean,
mm-hmm,
they're very, it's
mm-hmm,
a weighty
mm-hmm,
leather with very lots of fur on it.
mm-hmm,
Um, so the piece about like so transitioning from the baby quilts, the birth quilts, the death quilts, I think are also really fascinating to me. Um, and what I thought was really interesting on 113, is this 113? There at the bottom, it says until recently. So the quilts are given to the religious practitioner who conducts the death ceremony, the funeral, and I think also to pallbearers in some cases. But it says in until recently, it was only given to a Christian minister. Like that just boggled my mind. I mean, I did like what dissonance
mm,
there. I mean, this is something that's an important aspect of your community, and but it came to your community by way of these Christians, and but like it's such a that was a weird situation to me. Also on page 114, you know, and I think you and I have talked about this a few times, like, oh my gosh, how like there's all of these things, particularly in the Lakota communities, where they're giving quilts away for a lot of reasons, births, deaths, basketball games, like, all this stuff. And so they have to make, the communities kind of come together quickly. And it sounds like from the basketball chapter that it may not just be women. I don't know.
mm-hmm.
They get together, they source stuff, and they make the quilts quickly. And here it says they can make one in approximately 4 hours.
I know that blew my mind.
And I mean, granted, I know a tied quilt, they're not hand quilting the whole quilt. It's just a tied quilt, assuming in 4 hours. But we're not talking about like 9 patches again. We're talking about star quilts. These things are not
Well,
easy.
the one thing that it's not saying though is like because I was thinking 4 hours. Like, do you guys have tops already prepared then? And maybe you're just assembling a quilt,
I don't
like
know.
that's the one that would make a lot of sense to me from start to finish to assemble
Hmm.
and quilt it. I
Or
mean,
maybe they have units ready. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it sounds like they have it down to a science.
mm-hmm,
They
mm-hmm,
can make these quilts quickly, however they have it,
mm-hmm.
ready. I mean, I think about like if I had a quilt top already together, just make it the quilt sandwich would probably take me longer than 4 hours because I'd be like constantly like trying to work it out.
Well, and that's where having a bunch of people in comes in handy.
Yes, it's
I
many,
will
many hands. Yes, it's definitely the concept of many hands.
We definitely can't
Um,
leave this page though without showing this photo.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's not that this photo necessarily fits with this particular topic in the
Yeah.
moment. They just didn't want to leave it out. But it says this remarkable photo records a series of quilts draped over horses in the July 4th, 1924 parade in Fort Totten, North Dakota. And it's
Yeah. It's a cool
incredible.
picture. Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. Fort Totten, there's a Fort Totten metro stop in Washington, D.C. I had no idea like what Fort Totten was. And so there's a Fort Totten, North Dakota. So
That's
like,
my first
is
time
there any
hearing it.
connection there? I have to switch lines at Fort Totten. So
Dee Marie also just said if strips were already cut out,
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like
yeah.
if you already have like maybe some of like strips or diamonds, however they're making them. Hey, Druid.
Oh, wow, Druin, my tumble turd
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, I mean it's got to be like a factory. Again, it's the many hands. But
Hmm.
I mean again, I'm just trying to like wrap my head around, I know, making the star you're making these units, in the quarters or whatever and then you put them together, but it's like does one person work on a unit? I don't know. We have to find somebody who's Lakota who can tell us.
Hmm.
I might have a line on that and I've
Well,
procrastinated a bit on finding our person to talk to us, but
I was gonna say the writer of this article is Sue.
mhm.
Um, so this might just be a case of lack of space. And if you were to reach out to her, she would just be like, "Oh yeah, so they blew blah 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 blah. Here's a bunch of pictures." Like,
Yeah.
and I mean it's probably some version of assembly line sewing. We all
Oh, for
know
sure.
how
Yeah,
to do that
absolutely.
ourselves. Um, that would be my thought. And then also on 116 we have more.
More of the amazing
Oh my
star.
God,
Yes.
like the stuff, like you could just put anything at all into a star quill. My
Hmm.
brain never, ever, ever went there. Ever, ever.
I know. I never would have thought of these two things either. And just like like I mean, again, the talent here is amazing.
Well, and how to
If we
make them so personalized.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. If we could just hop back to 115 just for one
Hmm.
moment. So first of all, I love the little section about Senator Tom Daschle. And I checked. He apparently had good relations with the Native Americans. So
Hmm.
with North Dakota, they um endorsed him. So I assume that he was given honor and he came through for them
Hmm.
is the hope. But what was the piece that's in that like purple bordered section? I love the fact they're talking about these giveaway items. Most of these items reproduced directly by female labor, as in star quilts, one of the most prestigious goods in ceremonial exchanges. And then at the very bottom, it says this status has resulted in the saying often heard at social gatherings, women are the carriers of culture. That's pretty like gets you right in the feels.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I know I had one more thing to say about this chapter. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
I don't, so go ahead and say your thing.
So on 117, where they talk about this, the quilt businesses, and they talk
Oh yeah.
about this, one of the border towns, the
Hmm.
factory was established, and this would have been in the 90s to manufacture Dakota quilts, but the factory does not employ any Indians. So once again, steal the concepts of people, and not to say like the star quilts are not owned by the Lakota, but or everybody across the nation has made star quilts, but
Well, part of that whole like go forth and conquer is to bleed the resources dry. I mean, when you really boil down to history, all wars are fought over resources, even if those resources are cultural identity that you're trying to erase. If we can commodify it, why shouldn't we? Who cares if they're next door? Like, it's infuriating, and I wish stuff like that, like I wish it was illegal to do. It's the only really way I can put it.
Well, it's one of those things where, I mean, you kind of have to, cases like that, you know, I mean, there's nothing illegal about it. It's immoral. And so that's where I always think that's where you have to make the decision. You have to, again, line in the sand, not going to spend my money there. I'm gonna make sure my friends and
Oh,
family
like
don't
vote
spend
with
their
your
money
money.
there.
Mhm.
You know, don't, yeah, vote with your money. Exactly. So shall we move on to Hawaiian quilts? And I think you've got something interesting to show us.
I do. So, um, in this chapter, right on 119 there, I was caught by this little quote here. Quilts are a unique blend of two diverse cultural traditions: American quilt making and the ancient Hawaiian art of making kapa. I'm assuming I'm saying that right. Tell me if I'm not.
Yes,
Uh,
you are.
Cloth made from the inner bark of the mulberry and other native trees. I found that very interesting. I am not very familiar, um, on much of Hawaiian quilt making or other Hawaiian traditions. So I was like, let's just take a little perusal. And I found us a little 5-minute video, kind of like an intro. We're gonna Inception for a minute. I'm sorry. Um,
You've gotten good at doing it fast, or I have not noticed Inception.
let's see. I always have to make sure that I'm going to share my sound. I found a little video just to show us a little bit about kapa. Very interesting. I really like, I'm kind of want to get my hands on some because I want to feel it.
Hmm.
But yes, I have my volume at not like 100.
Okay.
So let me know if it's because I remember last time I had it really high and I saw you like take one of your headphones off.
If there's any sound, I'm not getting anything. So,
This looks very peaceful and very relaxing to do. Like, just an FYI. You're muted, honey. Get with the program stuff.
sorry. Yeah. I was trying to keep the volume down so we could hear. Yes, I have seen this process done before. It's very interesting. It's amazing. You're like, what? What is happening here? Very
Oh.
cool.
No, she's peeling this off. You're muted, by the way. I'm just curious because it doesn't go into depth. There's another thing that's like 45 minutes long that I didn't watch. Do they only get one piece per piece?
Yeah. So what this is, it's the mulberry. It's a certain section of a certain age of like it's a sapling, and it's a
Mhm.
certain section of it that has like this um ideal section of bark, but they get that outer bark is like a very thin outer bark, and then what she's cutting is this inner bark that's thicker, and it kind of peels away from like the center of the whatever the center bit of the tree is.
But then there's nothing else to do. Like with the center, you can't get another piece from it, right? when she peels this
No,
off.
I think this is like a piece of inner bark. Yeah.
Janet said the Quilt Folk Adventure series that went to Hawaii
Yes.
covered the making of this textile. Oh, interesting. Well, I didn't
Yeah,
do
I was gonna that's where I've seen a lot of really cool stuff. And I would recommend if you are interested in Hawaiian quilt making, the adventure series through Quilt Folk, you can purchase that. I think that one single class and is really, really good. It goes into kappa. In fact, this woman looks a little, but the name, I don't think her name is the same, so I don't think it's the same woman, but yeah, the kappa, and it gets into some museum kappa, which was
Hmm.
so fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's some good stuff.
That's it.
That actually may be the same woman that was, I don't know, Janet, did you think she reminded you of the same woman that was in the Quilt Folk? I feel like she might be the same woman.
Hmm.
Because like her backyard, the little, it was like
You
almost like a
heard a
little
lot of
arbor.
chickens and turk and
Yes.
roosters and stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, Jenny and Kay went there. And yeah, the tools and stuff she was using look very familiar. So anyway, um, yes, isn't that fascinating? I mean, and so Druid has given us some of the scientific information. It's the inner bark of a tree is called the phloem and is responsible for transporting food. Yeah, so it's like these cells in there that are, yeah. Janet saying she's much younger in this clip. Yeah, that's possible. Yes, it's a thin layer of living cells just inside the bark that produces new cells and allows the tree to grow wider. So yes, but the fact that you're starting off with like this little sapling and you're peeling off this little bit of bark that's like this wide, and then you beat it and it grows.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I was like, what? I
When
mean,
they
it's
were
like rolling
hanging,
dough out. Yeah.
when they were hanging dry, well, it's funny, when she rolled it up, it almost looked like cotton to me. It almost
Hmm.
looked um I can't think, like,
The roving,
like
like,
stockings, like
oh, okay.
it kind of looked like that. But then when it was
Hmm.
hanging and drying, It almost, I know you're going to tell me the name of the cloth. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it almost looked like like sampler cloth, you know, the way
Oh, the Ada cloth.
I'm thinking of something else, something older than Ada. I forget, but you could almost see that kind of same like warp and weft kind of look when you would look through it.
Okay, so that's where those square beaters that they're using, they have like a design carved into them, and they're different designs. So then when they beat they beat it out even thinner, it leaves like a kind of a texture. And that's sometimes what those and she was using those little sticks and pressing down there, those little sticks are carved, and then they use like, the tip of a stick or something just to make
Hmm.
dots and things. Sometimes I think those designs are mimicking the texture that they've made on the kappa cloth. But it's
Oh.
amazing because it looks very papery, but what they've said is like after you use it a lot, it becomes very soft.
Well, just
And
like if you took paper and you just kept crinkling it up and crinkling
mhm,
it up and crinkling it up,
mhm,
that's like when she was doing that, like rubbing on it, that
mhm,
kind of reminded me of. Did you ever do that experiment in grade school where you crinkled paper a lot and it would get very soft? And
mhm.
I don't know why we did that experiment, but
I don't remember. I vaguely do remember the crumpling of paper.
hmm, hmm.
But yeah, kappa is so interesting, and it's um, when you get into the history of like they did things with kappa cloth that were so fascinating. Like there's this one scene that it's in a museum, and I can't remember if it's in Hawaii or one of the other islands, but they show it's basically a kappa comforter, and it's big. I mean, they join these pieces together to make like big like blankets, and
Hmm.
but the layers, and I can't remember how many, it might have been 3 or 4 layers, were all stitched together along one side. And so what it was like they would say if it was cold, I mean, I don't know how cold it really gets in Hawaii, but if it was cold, you would put the whole thing over you, and if you got warm, you would just peel off one of the pages, just flip the page to the side, but
That's
it was all
interesting.
connected. Yeah, you would just peel off however many of the layers,
It's like
and
it's like you're sleeping with a book on you.
yeah, or like a big blanket that's folded up, and you're like, okay, I don't need this much. I could just peel open, one of the sides. And I just thought, I was like, that is so fascinating. Like what, the insulating properties of kappa, they have it down to a science, like
Yeah.
where they, however many layers they need, and then just peel off the ones you don't. I just thought that was so cool. Um,
That is, I mean, that became kind of the dominating theme for me, like reading this chapter because I can't became like so enthralled with that. So I don't know if you have other particular
yeah,
things, but I know
you
that you
know,
did say you really wanted to get to the last one because you had a lot to say about the last chapter.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would just say about the Hawaiian, I mean, a lot of what they talk about in here has kind of already been touched on. I mean, a lot
Hmm.
of what this section really deals with is the documentation project.
Hmm.
Well, I have good news for you guys, and we won't really be able to show it here tonight because we do have other stuff to talk about. But um, and this is terrible. As I was reading this, it's the Hawaiian quilt.
Research
What is it?
project.
Huh? Research project. Yeah. I kept so it's HQRP. I kept seeing it as HORP, which tells me I need to get new glasses, or the font on here was really bad because the Q's look like O's. So not HORP, but HORP. It's on the Quilt Index. So you can go to the Quilt Index. I'll drop the link in here, as we finish talking here, but you can go look at it, and it's all that they've talked about here and some, I think, because I think it's grown. But I
Yeah,
loved some
you'll
of the
have to make sure to drop that into the Slack for me so I can stick it in the thing later.
Yes, yes, I will. But I just love some of the information they put in here was, people coming from all parts of Hawaii and including 3 generations in one family. I love that. That's so cool. Um, and how they started off by tracing the patterns, and then finally they were like, this takes too long. And so they started taking pictures, and then they could digitally trace them, which is no
Hmm.
big deal now.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Um, and then this surprise of finding um these whole cloth quilts with red outline embroidery stitches, like almost like red work that
Hmm.
they weren't expecting to find. And
Hmm.
also what I loved is them recording the utilitarian quilts that came in, with the pretties. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if it was made by the same person, you know, if they made a big, beautiful, Hawaiian quilt, but they also made utilitarian quilts, they documented those. And I think that's really important. I love that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the Kauai Museum also is part of the Quilt Folk passport series for
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii. And they go in and you see Liliakalani's quilt, you see like all kinds of cool stuff in that. So again, if you like the museum parts of it, Hawaii's got some great museums apparently. Um, so yeah, I think that was probably all I wanted to say about that chapter. But yeah, Hawaiian quilts just continue to amaze me. They're just so interesting and they can be so beautiful in their simplicity, you know?
No, I think we've probably got a solid Hawaiian book in our future,
Yeah.
like for
Well,
reading.
I have a couple of Hawaiian quilt
I
books
do. I do too.
yeah, I just sometimes will page through them and I have done one small Hawaiian you know, little thing.
Hmm.
It was, it was very challenging. It's, it's not as easy as it looks. You know, you think like,
It
oh,
does not look easy.
well,
Earth
but I
is
mean
describing it as looking easy.
but from the perspective of like, I mean, you're talking about two colors.
Hmm.
You're talking about something that starts off as just a big piece of paper that's folded in eighths and you cut it like a snowflake. I mean, it's something that children do. But when you get into these really complex, beautiful designs that mean, they're metaphorical of stuff, they have meaning and um, and you've got artists that are very good at making designs that reflect those, a lot of it is the flora and fauna of Hawaii.
Hmm.
Um, it goes from being this simple thing to this like very complex and beautiful art, and it's just amazing to me. So, shall we move on to basketball quilt ceremonies?
You said you were very excited that you had a lot to say about.
Well, I probably actually had more to say about Hawaii, but I read a majority of this chapter to my husband. I said, I want to read this to you. I
Oh,
didn't
your
read
poor
like the
husband.
no, I said it's about quilts, and of course, he looks over at me and I said, and basketball. And he's like, okay, I'm listening. And no, so as I read this to him, he was like, the whole time he's like nodding and he's like, yeah, yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Um, we touched on this before because, in the giant chapter, Marsha MacDowell wrote about this. Um, I just think that this tradition that, and it surprised me like they getting into the actual like story of it. It's not that old of a tradition. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like what, 50 some years old, maybe, well, 60, I guess 60 years old at this point. Um, so it's not that old of a tradition, but everything about this tradition speaks to the values of this community, and it's like these are the kind of values that I wish could be reflected in you know, our greater global sphere, Um, the care and the thought that's put into their decisions about this, um the fact that it has spread and that it's just as big as the actual like basketball games, I guess. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously I would think the winners of like these championships are, that's the important part of this for them, but when you're talking about teams where it's like, they're good sports,
Hmm.
they lost, but they're still have the ceremony to observe, and they don't let their loss get in the way of this recognizing people that helped them. And I mean, this is so carved into the community now.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just such a beautiful thing. And I want to know more about like what I'll read this part, the origin of the tradition. All right, it says the basketball star quilt ceremony sprung from an act of honoring at a 1947 Brockton, Montana basketball game. Tessie Four Times, grandmother of one of the players, expressed her pride in her grandson by wiping the sweat from his back with a shawl and then casting the shawl on the floor for anyone to pick up. This act can be traced to a native custom of honoring those in battle. So I'm curious to know more about that, like, that tradition. But I mean, I just pictured this grandma being so proud, and it's like, it's a grandma. Of course it's a grandma, you know, that came
Hmm.
up with this. And then,
Hmm.
this Red Eagle Presbyterians Lady Aid Society was like, hey, remember back when Grandma Tessie 4 times did that thing? Why don't we make that into a thing? And I'm just like, it's a grandma. I just love that so much. And, I just go back to the fact, like, so in the pictures, and I'll just point to the one I'm talking about here. It's this.
I'll hold
this
it up.
one. Yeah, it's the one right here where the young man, it's the black, yeah. So the caption says, shortly before the ceremony commences, team members and families gather to view quilts to make final decisions about recipients. In this photo, Golden Walking Eagle shows off the star quilt he will use to honor a member of one of the opposing teams. I mean, so it's not even just being good, like good sportsmanship and having this quilt gift ceremony, but like you're literally giving it to teams that you were playing against, the students, the coaches, like, and again, that is such an incredible, like, a display of character. It's like, I feel like, these kids are being raised like the right way with their head in the right place. There's that I had something else that I had marked, but I guess I didn't. Oh, I thought it was also interesting. I had no idea, this is just me. I had no idea that high school amateur athletes, athletics prohibits gifts worth more than $15. I thought that was just a college football thing.
Oh.
Or a college basketball thing.
I am not at all privy to knowing either of those things.
Well, that's the thing about like athletics, college athletics, when they're like you have the recruiters, like the NFL recruiters that come by. And I think they do this in high school too, I guess, where their college recruiters are trying to recruit. And they're like, they're not allowed to come in and like, oh, let me take the whole family on this like luxurious dinner and let me give this kid this.
So that probably has a whole lot to do with the college admissions scandal.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I was just watching a documentary on that.
That stuff makes me so mad. I can't. But yeah, I mean, that's what it's about, though. It's to keep, even the playing field and no, I mean, lobbyists, like all of the ways that you can bribe people. I mean, that's what it's about. But anyway, I just thought, the fact that they could give the quilt to a parent instead. And that's also honoring the parent because you raised your kid right. So you are getting a quilt too. And I was like, man, that is like, I wish we could do that globally. I wish that like we could just like, I wish I had an army of quilters who would be willing to make quilts and we would give them out to people. Like, you're a good one. You get a quilt. You're a garbage person. You will never get a quilt. In fact, do you have any quilts? I'm going to take them from you.
No, I was gonna say, like, you're not worthy. Is that the way to like mark? Like, that's how you know which people in the world are evil, is they don't have any quilts.
They don't have any quilts.
Is that gonna be
nobody will give them a quilt.
Is that gonna be like the ultimate dating advice? Like, girls, the minute you get into his apartment for the first time, snoop and look for the quilts. If you can't find any quilts, you march your behind out of there.
Yeah. One quilt or less, red flag. Multiple quilts, I hear those are called the green flags.
Yeah, check for tags. Are they from Walmart? Like, they're not legit.
Are they handmade? Yeah. But I mean, really, like if you think about it that way, like a person, if you were able to judge people that way, a person with a lot of quilts that they did not make themselves, that's a person who's loved very much.
Hi, Yaccamaw. Yaccamaw said a quilt might fix them and make them look at things differently.
Could be.
I feel like
I'm going to let you have this quilt and see if it changes your ways. And if it doesn't, I'm taking it back.
I feel like this is kind of the same scenario as like animals, like if animals don't like somebody, like they're probably not a very good person.
Yeah. Or little kids, I think too, are the same way. Like they can sense some ick in a person. And so, yeah, but I quilts,
yeah, so
I think
then
are
we have to be
like
if a kid senses ick, right, then there has to be an ick scale. And then it's like, how much ick? Like, is it like we have to decide how much ick can a quilt erase from a person? Can it literally take the quilt to wipe away the ick? so that they're not a good person,
Hmm.
or so that they become a good person, and how much ick is too much ick for a quilt.
Okay. I think a quilt can safely wipe away like you get in the 10 items or less line with like 20 items. Like a quilt, okay, a quilt can wipe that out. I'll have to think about that.
What about like if you steal people's like parking spaces that they've been waiting for in a busy parking lot with their blinker on?
I think it's gonna take a lot of quilts to erase that. Oh my gosh. We need to come up with a scale. Like how many quilts do you need to own that people have given you as as a testament to the fact you're a good person? Like anytime you do a bad thing, just start taking quilts.
Instead of Hail Marys? Or what if the act of creating the quilt and gifting could be like a way of redemption,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's a lot of effort.
So I'm not Catholic, but I would assume it's like the things they make you like the acts of contrition
Mhm.
after confession. So you I'm sorry, you are going to be sentenced to I don't know, 100 hours of community service and you're going to have to make a quilt.
I feel like it might get a lot more done because there's quite a lot more contemplation time in a quilt than just like going in and being like, I confess my sins, thanks, okay, bye. Like, I feel like we're gonna have to write a handbook about this.
Yeah. Well, I do have a cousin who's a priest, so I'll say like, can you start like handing out, I don't know, 5 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, and you must make a lap quilt.
Or
I want to see a lap quilt before next confession.
we can hand out things like 12 9 patches and 13 applique doves and a partridge and a pear tree, and
Hmm.
we can be blah.
Or, girl, you're going to hell unless you can crank out a mariner's compass.
Or a Baltimore album quilt.
There you go.
Wow, this has taken a very interesting turn.
It
We
really
can
has.
blame it on Jill's cold medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that I will yes and anything. So, all right. So, did you want to repeat our chapters for next time?
Oh, next time. We're doing for November 12th. Oh my God, November 12th. Um, sorry, I'm just we'll be doing pages 137 through 175. See, I keep every week's uh in the beginning of my book here so that I can remember, and then I cross them out as we're doing stuff. Yes, Druid, the sacrifice of the quilter should be very important, especially if
I
you
think
are a
so, yeah.
sinful person. Hey, we can make it's the way to make things and more meaningful again.
Well, I think that we have wrung all we can out of these chapters. And I'm sorry, guys, we're gonna have to release you back to election at large or go to bed early tonight.
I know half of me was like, what were we thinking? Why didn't we try to find like a movie or something to watch, or I don't know, something. But I will say there is something that I had planned on us to look at tonight that we didn't get a chance to look at. So we'll have to save it, I guess, for next week. But there's always interesting things that
Oh, and before we go, let me make sure I'll put this in the quilt index for Hawaiian quilts,
oh yes, and in the Slack, my dear.
as also in the Slack. So I guess that'll do it for us tonight.
I didn't do that much coughing, but I've been sucking on lozenges the whole time.
Yeah.
Only a little bit of coughing.
Well, that's good. And I'll be back on Thursday.
I'm gonna go to bed.
I think that's a good idea.
All
All
right,
right,
everybody.
guys. So good to see you all. And we'll see you next time.